All right. So, really stoked and first off, thankful that we are able to come together tonight, night before we normally meet, so I can go over all this with you guys and take a break from our um, normal weekly group. Um, we're gonna actually, instead of talking about last week's sermon, we're gonna look at some gritty issues and something that's really intense to talk about, maybe a little uncomfortable. We're going to talk about sin. Surprise. Um, so let's just get into it. We'll be talking from Romans, and if we all know what the major theme, the meat and potatoes of Romans, is that what? God saves sinners. So in order to understand how God saves sinners, we have to take a look at what sin is. So, we can definitely look that there's still, even till this day, a realization that sin is all around. It's we realize that the problem with the world isn't the world itself. It's that the problem with the world is us. It's with us, even it's not our politics. It's not anything that we can do, but it's us within ourselves. Sin is the mass shootings, the wars, all the other garbage and the lies in politics and all that. But when it all comes down to it, and it boils down to it, that everything's pointed right back to us. We are the cause of these sinful acts and sinful things that is within this world. So let's just, I've got a lot of scripture to cover, so let's first look at Romans 3, verse 9. We go 9 through 18, which is titled, No One is Righteous. It says, What then? Are we Jews any better off? No, not at all. For we have already charged that all, both Jews and Greeks, are under sin, and as it is written, no one is righteous, no, not one. No one understands, no one seeks for God. All have turned aside, together they have become worthless. No one does good, not even one. The throat is an open grave. They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of asps is under their lips. Their mouth is full of curses and bitterness. Sounds a lot like I was talking about earlier with politics, huh? Their feet are swift to shed blood, and their paths are ruin and misery, and the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Let's look at verse 10, where it states, as it is written. Now, the history of as it is written was originally a phrase that was coined by the rabbis. They would use that phrase to prove a point and to look back at the Old Testament. So essentially here it's saying, as it is written. So we're going back to the Old Testament. We're going to refer back to the Old Testament, which I'm going to often do through the text here, and just to point out some things. So as it is written, no one is righteous, no, not one. No one understands, and no one seeks for God. Now this sums up the number one of the three things, the three truths of sin that I want to talk about. The ungodliness of sin is shown here. No one seeks for God. Not seeking God is an ungodliness. We look at how Paul ends it here, where he states that there is no fear of God before their eyes. So there we go, ungodliness of sin. I'm reading a quote from John Stott, and he says that sin is the revolt of self against God. So taking one's self-interest and using it for personal gain or pleasure is a revolt against God. I think that sums it all up right there. The number two that I want to speak about is the universality of sin. It's universal. No one is righteous. No one. So no one who does good, not even one, is what Paul states here. Sin is literally universal. Every person is sinful. No one's exempt. No matter what you do, no matter who you know, no matter how many good things you can do, you are still sinful. You know, Paul's stating here that everyone turns away. All have turned away. The number three truth of sin that I want to point out is the pervasiveness of sin. Now, this is often misunderstood and mistaught, even that this is a foundational thing of the Orthodox doctrine of total depravity. Now, we've heard of total depravity before, just recently even. If you didn't know what it meant there, because it wasn't described or depicted in the sermon, that often be taught that it's a sin that is as bad as it can get. You know, there's no coming back from that sin. That's wrong. That's not what it means. It means that every aspect of you has been corrupted. Every aspect of you has been twisted as sin. Total depravity. A good example of this is children. Have you ever played with children and they have a toy, you take the toy from them, or another child is trying to share that toy? You know, sharing is a tough thing to teach kids because we're naturally sinful. So what does that child do? Takes the toy back, mine, instantly. You aren't teaching that kid that everything is his. That child automatically is selfish, is sinful, is totally depraved. We don't teach kids to be bad. Through the law of God, there is the knowledge of sin. We know that through His law and through His word that things are sinful, things are wrong. It is wrong to be so selfish to take that toy. I want to play with that toy. You know what I mean? To summarize it, every human being is in and under the sin that has been created by Adam and Eve. Every aspect of who we are, everything we do is marred. And the problem is that most don't believe this description. That's where I have a problem with, and that's where you should have a problem with. Because most don't believe that description that every human being is in and under sin is truth. What's fundamentally true about that is that you don't believe this is true about you. We have to understand that total depravity is to all of us. If we can, just we're going to fast forward a little bit, just due to the sake of time. Let's go to Romans 5:12. Just to look at we're going to look at some aspects of sin. So how sin was created, what is sin now, and what can we do with it? So if we look at Romans 5:12, it says, therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all sinned. If we stop there, we look at that is a reference of the imputed sin. What does that mean, imputed? It's the original sin. So it's the sin that Adam created as he took the apple, and goes back to Genesis. And I'm not going to go through all that, just as I stated before, just for the sake of time. If we continue on, verse 13 says, for sin indeed was in the world before the law was given, but sin is not counted where there is no law. We'll stop right there. Inherited sin. So we are naturally born sinners. So sin indeed was in the world. So it was here after Adam sinned. As we continue on, yet death, verse 14, yet death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those whose sinning was not like the transgression of Adam, who was a type of the one who was to come. There's a whole lot here. To start off, it's the individual sin of us. So what are our aspects here? We have imputed sin. It's our original sin. We have inherited sin, which is what we inherited from Adam's bloodline. We are born into sin. Individual sin is the sin of us. It is our inherited sin. But that end there, who was a type of the one who was to come. So it gives us the hope. Now, there's a whole lot here. My battery's going to die any minute here. Paul contrasts the effect that Adam had on humanity and the effect of Jesus that Jesus had or has on us, had and has on us. Sorry, we can sum all of this Romans up here in one phrase. Write this down, because when I came up with this, that was pretty cool. Adam made us merely human, but Jesus makes us truly human. Adam made us merely humans. This bloodline, we are merely a human, but with Jesus, he can make us truly human, who we were supposed to be, to go back to the original state of ourselves and what we were created to be. Now, we are all fallen sinners. We know this. Despite our characters, despite our morality or works, the things that we do, are all lost and without hope. We are on this planet, we are on this earth, and we are condemned to suffer in an endless torment. Hold on. Unless they are drawn to salvation through Jesus Christ. You're like, what? Endless torment? We are required to be tormented? I don't think so. I think you're reading a different book. But for real, unless we're drawn to Jesus Christ and we answer that calling, then we won't suffer. But, to understand more of Romans and where Paul came from and everything that was going on during this time, we need to look at that historical background as well. Paul wrote to the book of Romans somewhere in between his third missionary journey, and since he had not been to Corinth yet during this time, it's only that we can assume that this was the time frame that he was writing this to the people of Rome with the intent that the Gentiles in Rome and present that can present the basic values and the systems of salvation. This time of his teaching it's the first time that Romans actually heard something taught by an apostle. And this goes for the Jewish population as well, because it's consistently speaking of the Jews. What then are we Jews? So there were Jews and Greeks there during this time, and this is the first time, aside from manuscripts and other people coming to teach, that an actual apostle was there. So it's very impactful. That's why it's so detailed and cutthroat. It's flashing at me. I've got like 2% battery left. Awesome. I think Paul was extremely influential at this time when many were constrained to the laws of the land, so to speak. Paul introduces sin and death, salvation, justification, redemption, and the resurrection all right here. All bang, 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 bang. So to start it off right here, this is sin, this is what it is, this is how the righteousness of God can develop through faith. And we can be redeemed through Jesus Christ. I think this all provides a greater understanding of how the church can be more aware of the basics of Christian religion. I think Romans is heavily, heavily overlooked or completely misquoted. And that goes back to what we were talking about with the knowledge of sin and total depravity. How quickly total depravity can be misinterpreted and misunderstood. I mean, that's with a lot of scriptures, but here particularly, I see that a lot. But if you take away anything from this, then take away that, as descendants of Adam, he made us human, but with Jesus, he can make us truly human again and to be who we were called and created to be. All right. Have a good night, guys.